So I'm going to try a new strategy today, and my goal is to put this video out and just be transparently honest. I really find it frustrating whenever there is such a disruption in routine that all of a sudden we just do not know how to go forth with what we have always known before that moment. So in this instance, you could say, all right, well, she must be talking about her kiddo. Well, I am, and I'm also talking about just like our routine and schedule. I'm talking about like the routine and schedule about like how things work in our government, how things work in our city or our county, how things work in our state. When we disrupt the natural routine and pattern of sequenced events that happen every day, then what's happening to us as a people as a result of that? For decades, we the people have been misled, have been desensitized to violence. And yeah, you can say, oh, it's those violent video games, it's that radical, whichever side you want to throw your shade at. Yeah, that could be a contributor. However, is it, though? How do we speak to one another? How has that changed? How do we have things orchestrated? Now, orchestrated is an interesting word to use, isn't it? Because it kind of gives that presumption of a trail of events that is pre-planned. Like a skit or a play, like an episode, a movie. Have you noticed that the algorithms of what you listen to, what you watch, that they seem to get a little heavy-handed in some areas? Or are they trying to stay more neutral and just going on the base routine of everything? If what we're listening to and watching is telling us that it's the other side's fault, then that's a moment to perk our ears up and say, hold on a minute. Now, of course, pointing out the reality of a situation and the hypocrisy is different than just throwing blame towards another. What I find frustrating is that there's been this large shift in religion that's been, like I want to say, orchestrated through politics. Religion, politics, it's like they go hand in hand, even though they don't. But because of these last, several hundred, but especially like the last several decades or 50 some odd years, it feels like as soon as the doubt had crept in and that was starting to be more normalized with opinion news rather than factual news, whenever people allow their opinions to be said in a news environment. You know, if you're wondering whatever happened to the news, they used to just report the news. You know, you're not wrong. If you're of that generation that's, you know, able enough to remember, and I know I do also, but I also remember that some news stations seem to cater more to one side than another, or shift blame more towards another. And that's where that opinion news kind of took over, and that shift began. Now, of course, all of the correlations could be a little deeper and go further back. However, I'm just going to go as far as I can remember, and then what I have observed through listening to other people's stories. You know, it turns out listening to one another is actually a very important thing. And whenever we think about movements of religion mixed with red hats, it just feels like it has lost the way of the message. It is now directly entangled, twisted in vines with thorns. And in order to break them apart from one another, you're going to either have to sacrifice your hands as the thorns gash deep into, creating thick wounds, or you're going to have to carefully untangle all of that. Now, we've allowed plenty of time for it to be carefully untangled. There has been a plethora of time in order for that to take place. I feel like now we're at a point where, yeah, we're just going to have to go right in. We're going to have to dive in. And if the thorns pierce and the wounds form, then that is basically our humility, our taking account of our own responsibility and our accountability, our personal accountability for what we as a people have done to one another by creating this barrier, this wall of separation. We're going to have to create wounds to heal wounds, if that makes sense. And I don't know if I love this metaphor. However, basically, in order to free ourselves of division, we are going to have to rip apart politics from religion. And the red-hatted believers are going to have to understand that they have been led astray from the flock, that they have been told that those that they have cast out are the wicked ones, when in reality they have been the ones led astray. And that is a really tough pill to swallow. How does it make us feel to know that we've been led astray? To know that we've been misled, that we've been lied to, that we have now turned into our own hypocrites, that we have preached upon the book of love, but it's actually been directly from the book of falsehoods. And the chapters on hate and racism, the chapters on history within destruction and what is seen as evil within the book of falsehoods, those chapters are so combined with one another. They're so entwined. It's like the lines have blurred between hate and love, within what is seen as politics and religion. Within the red-hatted believers, there is not a lot of wiggle room for compassion for all people. Whenever you've been told that all these other people are to blame, how can we compassionately love one another and be there for one another if red-hatted believers feel that those who do not believe are doomed to damnation? Now, you may preach upon Old Testament. You can do that all day as a red-hatted believer. However, if you are preaching upon New Testament, then you have to understand that the entire tone and melody of that entire book, that is surrounded within the book of love. And it actually does not have any merit in the book of falsehoods. In the book of falsehoods, there is a non-factual existence. There is the mention. And yes, there is that chapter that's talking about the actual book of love and what that means within New Testament. We actually have to understand that division and hardship among groups and organizations and centralized minorities of people have been continually discriminated against based on Old Testament to New Testament. And our red-hatted believers, my dear friends, my loved ones, those who are listening, and you right now, we do not have to separate ourselves any longer. Cast out what is the not truth, the falsehoods that take you from the loving compassion for all people, to be there for all people through all walks of life, and to not be the judged. It is not our place to judge one another. What heavenly creators will be the ones to be the judge. We do not need to take it upon ourselves to judge. For whenever we do judge one another, we are showing our own colors within red-hatted lines. So, how is this going to help the future? Because I can't exactly say it will or won't. It is the acknowledgement and not just observation. It is the understanding and not just rejection of belief. It is the understanding that it's okay to not be correct, to have been led astray, to admit that your heart has been deceived. And it is okay to say that you were wrong. And if you don't wish to say these things, then live in a new life, in a new way, through open eyes and a compassionate, overflowing heart. Through our actions, our words can be magnified for what is unsaid through words, but told through action, can either show what is true within the book of love or express what is perceived love within the book of falsehoods. I want to take one last moment to just collect my thoughts here and see how I feel about everything, because I want to share so many more things, and I never know what direction any of my thoughts, videos, audio recordings, any of it is going to go. Even my person-to-person conversations. I've been so focused upon Old Testament as of like the last, well, quite a while, to be honest, within a book of division and rules. And it just feels like, such a small margin of words that has been collected from past time and completely deconstructed, put back together, revised, rewritten, and translated into a plethora of languages that can be understood by a larger majority of people. What game of telephone has happened to this particular chapter within the humanity existence that we have lived? So I don't want to focus so much on what has been, but I do understand the parallels and where we have come from. So when we talk about flipping tables, well, that is completely ripping apart the vines that have entangled between politics and religion. That has consumed red-hatted believers into believing that this is the way, when in fact they have been led astray. And to hear this and to know so much of your time and your faith and your words and your belief is entangled upon all of this, it shows even more how much we need to rip apart the thorny vines that have bound you to a false religion. Our red-hatted believer brothers and sisters and theirs and others within this world, they're not horrible, terrible people. They're people just like you and I. And they deserve our love. And they deserve our time just as much as everyone else. For would the man with sandals have cast them aside? Or would he have embraced them and sat with them in broken bread? Perhaps for this week, I really would like people to think upon what is happening within the world, and an old saying that kids of, I want to say the 90s, remember. And that's why there's an entire generation or generations of people who have grown up within these odd lines that have shifted, divided, and separated, disillusioned and masked within truth, embedded in falsehoods. The reason why I feel like I have such a steadfast belief is because I do ask the questions like, what would Jesus do? Wwjd? Did anyone have a bracelet or a necklace or any type of a totem-like object that you were given, that you saw, or that you wore when you were younger?